Yeah, so we're basically the only channel to predict this crash, and we're not financial advisors, but we're definitely better than your financial advisor in our opinion. I mean, I spoke to a couple of high net worth individuals, famous football manager, who spoke to his financial advisor and was told, oh yeah, no, keep it in, blah blah blah. We've had calls of people calling up saying they want to take their money out of the market. And he insisted 3 times, no, I want it out. And obviously there's a huge conflict of interest there. They want you in the market. They want to get their fees and all it like a broker does. They want their fees. So there's a huge conflict of interest. So I'm not saying ditch your financial advisor totally, but maybe you should be listening to.
You have to be insistent when you're dealing with brokers and financial advisors because they're paid to keep
Mm.
you in the market, and they are always going to keep you in the market. They're not going to keep you in the sidelines with cash because they're not making any money out of that. And as you say, we have consistently since the end of last year been saying, this market is, in the final thrust, and it's going to fall.
I'm just going to list a couple of points that we made on our previous videos. So the first video we made, 100% crash in January. Wasn't trendy to obviously make videos then. You in the video said, let's give it to the end of Q1, and then you specifically quoted March.
Sometimes heading into the end of the quarter as well, which I think the dot-com crash back in 2000 was in March.
And literally, was it March 10th? Bang on March.
Yeah.
That's when the crash started. In the video, I highlighted where I thought the market would get to, and I showed the 200 moving average on a weekly time frame, looking at where the price could go to, like the 200 period moving average on a daily or weekly time frame, which is quite far away. And we were literally this close to tapping it, but then obviously Trump paused the tariffs. I still think we're going to get there, and we'll go on to action points from this video. And then I also showed the 200 on the monthly and where that is, and that's obviously almost like a double dip recession to where the pandemic is. But I think definitely around this weekly moving average, if we start to come back down to there, there's the potential swing trade opportunity. And potentially, if you get like not the SP 500, but maybe I think there's a 3 times leveraged index, that could be definitely a really good play, potentially just for a bounce, maybe even back to all-time highs from there.
Or just buy the futures.
Yeah. And then also we predicted that Elon would depart, and get frustrated with the administration trying to do really good stuff. And so I want to just credit our last video, not the first video we made on a prediction. We made our follow-up video after the price falled, and then now we've hit the 200 on the daily. There might be a dead cat bounce here, and we call the dead cat bounce. We said it's going to bounce here a little bit, and we quoted the 200 on the daily and the 50 as where it might dead cat bounce to. Unluckily for me, I was looking at my brokerage app and they have a different calculation of this moving average, and actually it was slightly higher, so I was looking at the wrong one. But if you look on TradingView and you look at where that dead cat bounce got to, touched the 200 daily moving average to an absolute needle pinpoint, and then collapsed, and now we're nearly at the 200 on the weekly. So I mean, you can't get a better prediction than that from it's unbelievable.
No, absolutely. Technical analysis, if you understand it, can be very powerful.
It's amusing everyone giving their 2 cents now when it's trendy on YouTube to give your 2 cents and get views, whereas we were doing it when no one else, YouTube algorithm wasn't going to help us get any views when no one else was talking about a crash.
Yeah, we were saying get out of this market because it's too dangerous to be in this market, and I would say it's still too dangerous. All the people, it's been trendy for the last 15 years to buy the dip. But one of these days, I'm not saying it's right now, but one of these days, buy the dip is going to stop working. And it's going to keep falling. That is going to happen with 100% certainty in the near future.
Yeah, and that's why you're saying if you want to invest in real money, which is like gold, which is silver, which is things like that, and then have fun with some of these other companies.
Yeah, well, we've also been buying on about gold since it was I think around 2,600 when we first started talking about it on this channel. I've personally been buying gold since it was less than $300 an ounce, but we've been talking about gold since 2,500, 2,600 thereabouts, and we're now up to this morning at 3,200. So I hope people have been following. If people have been selling stocks and buying gold, they've been making a fortune over the last few months while everybody else has been losing money.
Yeah, and I mean the rise on the last 3 candles of gold has been crazy, very, very powerful.
It's been very unusual.
Average,
to see $100 days in gold is very, very unusual. Normally it moves very slowly, but it just shows that something is fundamentally wrong in the financial system when you're seeing gold making these kinds of moves.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, there's other people there, not just Trump and Elon.
Well, did you see what he said about Peter Navarro, the trade advisor that he's I
No, I
think
knew there was
he's
someone he was frustrated with, but I didn't know who it
he's
was.
dumb as a sack of bricks, which I think Elon has a point there because
Yeah.
these tariffs make no sense to in the real world.
Mm-mm.
It's quite incredible that the US government is going down this path, and obviously they were the bond vigilantes forced them to change course and suspend them for 90 days, which makes them look very weak. So it's
Yes,
just
exactly.
it's a disaster all around.
Yeah, I mean, it has sort of worked to get them to the negotiating table, but like you said, if you say you're gonna do something, you stick to it. And at least when he said if you're gonna retaliate, we're gonna retaliate with even more force, and that's what he's done with China. And
Oh,
they devalued the yuan as well.
it's just a disaster. I mean, when people see it's the biggest tax rise in history, and when people see things like their iPhones doubling or trebling in price, I think Trump's popularity is going to be gone.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why you said from day one, if you're going to have tariffs, you need to have no income tax. The things that they're buying that aren't essential, yes, they're more expensive, and that's how the government.
Yeah,
Uh,
the whole this whole thing, as
mm,
we've said again and again, when it's been unpopular, the whole Elon Dodge thing is not going to work. Not because of Elon. He's obviously a very talented guy and obviously knows what he's doing.
yeah,
But the US government is never going to cut expenses. There are too many things that are out of control. They're increasing all the time. They're talking about Dodge and cutting costs and finding all these benefits they're paying that shouldn't be paid and so on. They're increasing expenditure elsewhere.
mm,
The
very good
budget
point.
is increasing this year. The budget deficit is going to increase this year. It's never going to change. The only time that this will change is when there's financial Armageddon,
Armageddon,
and
and there's no dead cat bounce buy, and there's no buy the dip opportunity.
the only thing that changes it is when they will ultimately destroy the currency because that's what there's no
Mm,
choice. But if you think about it, there is no choice for the US government other than to destroy the US dollar
yeah,
because the only way out is to cut government spending, as
yeah,
Elon Musk has correctly pointed out. But it's never going to happen.
yeah,
So what
yeah.
they're going to do is they're going to be forced to continue printing
At some
money,
point,
which
yeah.
means interest rates are going to rise, inflation is going to rise, and the dollar will ultimately be worth its true value, which is less than the paper it's printed on.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, 1929 all started the biggest crash in history, 82%, I believe. Was, that was the start of that was because of tariffs, but there wasn't the Fed set up and the knowledge of how to print money and stuff. So I would argue that we're in that sort of an environment, but there is, this, like you say, money printing environment, which can basically halt and support a economy, artificially. But as you're saying there, at some point they're going to have to ditch that, and that will be total
Yeah,
Armageddon.
we've had this artificial economy for
Too
the
long.
last 17 years now, since 2008. We've had
Mhm.
this artificial economy built on printing money, built on quantitative easing, printing this fake money, which has kicked the can down the road
Mm.
for a long time now, so that they could avoid a major recession or depression back in 2008,
Yeah.
2009. They've only kicked the can down the road. They haven't avoided it. It is coming, and it's coming, and it's going to
Yeah.
be 10 times bigger than it ever had to be before. It's going to be the biggest crash in
Mm.
history when it comes.
Yeah, yeah. And what's amusing is actually, Democrats don't seem to ever want to do anything about it and just look like they're taking the glory. I mean, the Republicans have tried to do something about it, but it's an
Like
impossible scenario.
they can't. It's a myth that the government can control the economy. The best thing any government can do for any economy is to keep out of the way and do nothing.
Yeah.
Government should
Let the
not be
free
involved.
market work. Yeah, let
Government
the
should
free
not be
market work.
involved in the economy. I mean, you think about it, it's totally insane for governments to be talking about trade. Why are governments involved in trade? The government should keep out of it. They should not be involved in trade
When they're
because
not business, they don't know how to run a business anyway. They don't know how
well,
trade even works.
trade is between a buyer and a seller. The governments don't make anything.
Mm,
They don't buy anything. They don't sell anything. They're not in business. Trade is
mm.
between two different businesses in different parts of the world. All a government can do is put obstacles in the way. You don't need free trade agreements and all this trade bullshit that governments are talking about. You just need businesses to be left to get on with trading with each other
Yeah,
without government interference. We
yeah,
need freedom. We need more freedom. That is what we need.
yeah.
And all this talk about from these morons about tariffs, it's not going to work. It's proof that they don't understand what they're talking about. And
Mm,
you've got all these people, and I know they've all got PhDs from Harvard and degrees in economics from Harvard, but those are the very people that you should avoid and you should have nothing to do with. And I think that's
yeah.
what Musk said about this guy Navarro, who's the architect of this ridiculous policy on tariffs. He said that this guy's never built anything, which is very true.
Mm, mm. No, and also I love your point. It's freedom and free markets, basically. It's the best way everything's always worked. And yeah, it's a shame that that people don't realize that, and they get stuck in this bot mindset of feeling like, they need support in so many areas of their
Well,
life.
it's this kind of tribal behavior. People think that their guy's going to change things. This time it's going to be different. This time, let's get my guy in, and everything's going to change. He's going to make things better. He's going to let's make America great again. And he's messing up America.
Mm,
And the next guy will be the same. Maybe next time the Democrats win, and the people are going to think that's going to make a difference. But ultimately, it's going to make no difference.
And it might artificially seem better, but it'll be even worse probably.
I don't think it ever does. I think that the rhetoric changes, but
Mm,
the underlying policies never changes. More money printing,
mm.
more taxes, more obstacles in the way of businesses, and less freedom.
No, no,
That's
no,
what
I
happens
agree. And that's what
every
I mean,
time.
artificially. Like, obviously, under them, it's actually worse, but
It's
they're
it's it's just
hidden. It's
it's
very hidden.
rhetoric. I mean,
Yeah,
okay, okay, I agree. There's a lot less of this woke nonsense now, but in the US, maybe not in the UK, but in the US,
mm,
there's less of this woke nonsense. But it's that's that's a fringe benefit. It's not
yeah, yeah,
it's the economy that drives everything in the world, and for the economy to work well, people need to be left alone.
yeah,
Government
yeah,
should not be involved in the economy. They should not be involved in money or finance. They should get the hell out of the way.
yeah. I mean, ignoring the financial aspect of it, well, not totally aspect, but if you think about how the left versus the right operate, I always like to, we said taxation is violence in one of our videos, and if you're using violence as the example, a left-wing person might, for example, if you're talking about the most evil person in the world, a left-wing person would kill lots of people, but not in their own name. Like they would get someone else to do it, like an assassin. A right-wing person would probably kill less people, but do it directly themselves. And I think that's also the same in some politics where you're sort of hiding certain elements of things if you're on the left side of things, whereas on the right, there's typically more transparency. But it's an interesting thought that I think's quite accurate, especially with the Keir Starmer just lying about everything that he's saying,
Well,
constantly backtracking. There's no transparency at all.
well, politics is just a way to outsource violence, is it
Yeah.
not? Because if you wouldn't do something yourself, you shouldn't be outsourcing it to somebody else to do. So people will outsource the violence to the government
Exactly.
because they want to, take money from the rich. For example, the socialists want to take money from the rich, and they don't want to go with a gun themselves. So they outsource it to the IRS or the Inland Revenue, controlled by their whatever people
Yeah.
are in charge of the government to go and conduct violence on their behalf. So you could argue that anyone who votes is in favor of violence. Ultimately, that's why
Mm.
I've never voted and never will.
Wow. Yeah, no, my father hadn't until just before he passed away, actually, because he was so. I think the Jeremy Corbyn Marxist threat was too strong in his eyes. But yeah, and then
Well,
just
you
quickly,
could have made a counter argument on that one that at least he was you could have brought about the global collapse and got it over with more quickly with
that's
a
a very good
super
point.
socialist like that in
That's a
power.
very good point. And as a Christian, I also see the view of the world like that sometimes. I almost enjoy some of this chaos because it feels like revelation is coming around a lot faster when they're like, exactly as you're saying there. But
Well,
just
I think you can almost make a case for okay, we all like to live in the good times, but at some stage we're going to have to experience this major
yeah,
coma, this major recession, or in my opinion, it's going to be bigger, the biggest financial crash we've ever seen, much bigger than
mm,
1929 or anything else.
mm,
And there's certainly an argument for getting it over with because we're
yeah,
going to have it at some point.
yeah, yeah.
And can they kick the can down the road for another 17 years? I would suggest that they can't.
Mm,
But and you also if you've been in the markets for a long time, you get used to the characteristics of how the market acts. And the bounce on Wednesday, which was what dug up more than 2,000 points, was one of the biggest one-day gains in history. But it felt very much like a bear market
yeah, yeah,
bounce rather than a real move. Because these bear market bounces, for those who've experienced them in the past, can be very, very powerful because there's like double the amount of buying. It's not people buying because they like the stocks. It's people buying to close out short
opportunity.
positions.
Yeah,
So they're basically you get in a real down move you get forced sellers, but in these up moves you get forced buyers,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is why at every market bottom there's always some talk about banning short traders and short traders being blamed for the market crash, which is nothing like the truth. But short traders are actually very valuable sources of liquidity and buying in down markets.
Yeah, yeah. The Nasdaq had, I think it's second biggest. But the S&P was maybe like the fourth.
If you look at some of the biggest moves, when the biggest moves happen, they happen in bear markets.
Yeah, and there was still more downside. I mean, the day after it retraced over half of that, and then now on to sort of action points. But yeah, I'd love to see it get down. I mean, in terms of advice to viewers, I mean, I'd love to see the markets head back down slightly below the previous low to that 200 weekly move, and I think that's
That would make for a beautiful chart pattern, which
yeah.
I love to see beautiful chart patterns, strange as that may sound, but that would make a very beautiful chart pattern, which would suggest at least a medium-term bounce is on the way.
Yeah. And linking to our other moving average, the 9 period moving averages is an entry point, which is why we made the last video and how we were predicting a dead cat bounce. This time actually was such a violent bear market sort of rally that it sort of got above that. But actually, what I want to see when it gets down to there is a bit of like a couple of days of slightly tighter consolidation, and then you can see that break back to the upside, breaking through that 9 period moving average a bit better, like we saw during the pandemic and like we saw during the 2022 crash when it crossed that 200 moving average on a weekly. So, and another point is just there's so much noise, when everyone's talking. There was no noise when we were calling a crash, but now there's so much noise about, what could this be? What's causing this crash? Whereas actually you sometimes have to just cut out the noise, and that's why I actually found that technicals can be quite a good way to just, even for your mental state, just to really focus
even with technicals, it's difficult to do because to be a successful trader, and any successful trader will tell you this, you have to do the opposite of what you feel like doing.
Yeah.
It's also a secret for success in life. You kind of have to do the opposite of what you feel like doing, because most people feel like doing not very much most of the time. So you have to do the opposite. But certainly being a trader, you have to do the opposite of what you feel like doing. When you feel like buying, you should probably be selling.
Yeah.
When everybody's saying, you've got to be in this one thing, you've got to be in Nvidia, you've got to be in Tesla, whatever, it's probably time to be going the opposite. You should always be going the opposite direction of the crowd, but it's especially at turns.
Yeah. And when everyone's saying, when everyone now comes out and says, it's going to this and that level, you can almost totally ignore it.
Everyone should be following some of the sentiment indicators for sure, and the VIX obviously being the main one, but there are others too. But you don't want to be following the crowd, because the crowd are, particularly small investors, are always wrong at major market turns.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, looking at those, and yeah, I think we've made some really good points here on terms of some politics, but also credit to us on a number of things, and some more predictions for people to bear in mind.
And more to come in the future.
Absolutely. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and join our Discord chat room linked in the description so you can see these plays and get in these opportunities when we do.
In the modern world, great leaders resolve their conflicts with words.
As for me, I like the stock.
Order filled.